So in today's presentation, I want to share what I have learned about the behind-the-scenes effort needed for making a storyline course accessible. I will be swapping back and forth between Articulate Review and the Articulate Storyline, so I can demonstrate how a keyboard navigates through storyline slides and how to configure your storyline course to be accessible. So I would love to have you follow along in both places if possible. I should probably put these in the chat in case you weren't able to get them, or I'll put the review link in the chat in case you weren't able to get it from the reminder email we sent this morning. I will also welcome questions at any time. I will try to keep an eye on the Zoom chat and watch for raised hands. I will also try to leave as many pauses as I can to leave room for those questions. So as a disclaimer, I do not claim to be an accessibility expert. In my time at Frederickson Learning, I have had an opportunity to develop e-learning for a variety of different government agencies and organizations that require accessibility compliance. During that experience, I've learned from accessibility experts and have developed my own best practices for building accessible courses. So if you open the Notes tab in either Storyline or Articulate Review, you can see that I've written out my thoughts to add more in-depth information to supplement the contents of the slides. You may also notice that I will be probably sticking to this kind of as a little bit of a script. That is because I'm very good at going off on tangents and forgetting where I was originally going with my thought process. So before getting into the focus of today's presentation, which includes keyboard accessibility and screen reader accessibility, I'll provide a brief overview of accessibility considerations in e-learning. Then for each of the main topics, I'll provide an overview. I will demonstrate how to configure Storyline for keyboards and screen reader accessibility. And then I will provide best practices and tips from what I've learned through the different Storyline courses that I have created in the past, and what I've learned from other accessibility experts. Finally, I will cover some pitfalls to watch out for as you are developing accessible courses and provide some resources for understanding web accessibility and guides for building accessible courses in Articulate authoring tools. So since e-learning is experienced on the web, e-learning courses need to follow web accessibility requirements. Those requirements are quite broad, so I strongly recommend visiting the W3C article called Introduction to Web Accessibility to learn more. And there is a link for that in the chat and also at the very end. Whoop. I see my menu got goofy, but there is a resources slide at the end of the course with hyperlinks to these articles. All right. So our first big focus is keyboard accessibility. So in e-learning, keyboard accessibility refers to how a user navigates through your slides using only their keyboard. While they're doing that, they will be using specific keyboard keystrokes, which include tab, which is the primary method for moving forward, and that is where the term tabbing comes from. Then there's shift plus tab, which is the primary method for moving backwards. The arrow keys are a secondary version or method of navigation and are primarily used in special situations such as quiz slides. They will be used to move between the different options because once you turn a group of objects into quiz options, Storyline will combine them into one tab target, and then it will use the arrow keys as the method for navigating between them. It is also how screen reader users will navigate through the reading order. So that includes everything on the slide that the screen reader will need to display. Enter is the primary method for selecting an object, and then space is a secondary selection key, and that is once again used in quiz slides. So for selecting quiz answer options. So the way a keyboard navigates through a slide is dictated by the focus order that is programmed in Storyline. Since keyboard tabbing only moves between interactive objects, the focus order is what, or sorry, let me go back. The focus order and reading order are commonly used side by side. The focus order usually means the order of interactive objects, and that is because keyboard tabbing only moves between interactive objects. So the focus order will generally be for people who are using a keyboard but can still see, and then the reading order encompasses all objects on the screen that should be visible to a screen reader.
Luke?
Yes.
In Storyline, it says change the focus order. It doesn't say reading order. So do you still use the focus order as the order things will be read?
Yes. Yep. The focus order window in Storyline is for organizing both the focus order and the reading order.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more of when we're kind of talking about either or how a keyboard user would interact with it,
Sure.
a visual keyboard user versus a non-visual keyboard user.
Okay, the good clarification. Thanks.
So it is important to note that keyboard tabbing will run through all objects on the slide itself before it gets to any of the player options, such as the previous next buttons or menu or notes or any of the buttons out on the player. So for example, if I go ahead and start navigating through using the keyboard, you can see my focus indicators now on the first interactive object, and then second object, then it goes to back to top, which is nice, allows you to go back to the first interactive object. And then it will cycle through all the different keyboard navigation. It skipped the notes. Interesting. So if you are in Articulate Review, I suggest using the keystrokes to practice navigating using only a keyboard. So at this point, I'll switch over to Storyline because we'll be demonstrating, how to access the focus order window. So the focus or reading order can be configured in the focus order window. So up in your Storyline ribbon, you can go to the Home tab and then the Slide group and select Focus Order. This will bring up your focus order window. By default, it'll usually be set to use, or not usually, it will be set to use the default focus order. And the default focus order will be from top to bottom, and then left to right based on the y coordinates of the object and the x coordinates of the object. So if we go back to Articulate Review, as I tab through here, let's go ahead and, there we go. As we tab through here, you can see that instead of going to the one just to the right and a little bit lower, by default, it's going to go to the next object that is at the same y coordinate, but now to the right. And then it will go to that. But you would expect to go from first, second, third, fourth, fifth if you were kind of it's kind of a more natural reading order. So you'd have to adjust that in the reading order yourself. So back in the focus order window, when you do create a custom focus order, you can now rearrange any of the objects by dragging them to a new position or selecting and using the up and down arrows to move them around in the order. In the focus order window, you can also delete objects by selecting the trash can. And then you can also return objects to the focus order, either all the objects, that is kind of tiny font there, or you can choose individual objects to return to the focus order. And when you do that, that will put them back at the bottom, so you will have to put them back where you would like them to be. Then once you are done, you should always remember to save. Otherwise, you can cancel if you want to discard your changes. So in this case, I would want to obviously, so I'll call out one thing here, even though I will talk about it in the pitfalls. Notice I cannot delete this and I cannot add alternate text for this specific object. This is on the slide master. Anything on your slide master can only be removed from the focus order or have its alt text edited while you are in the slide master editing screen. You can still rearrange them in the order while you're here, but they cannot be removed from the order. So how I would organize this is I would go from top to, or how I would want this organized is mostly how it is. I do have this window or this image removed, but I would then move these guys up here. Well, I would move you down here and then have my picture and then the markers in the order I want. And then I would save that. Next, we will talk about the focus indicator. So the focus indicator is that visual indicator. I'll go and switch back to Articulate Review. Is a visual indicator that lets keyboard users know what their cursor per se is focused on. And in Storyline, that visual indicator includes a highlight around a solid outline. When you're in Storyline, or you can edit that by going to the player menu, and that's going to pop up my other screen, of course. Then you go to colors and effects, and here you can adjust the accessibility focus colors. The first color is for that highlight, and the second color is for that outline. Most of the time, the yellow around a dark highlight will work fine because the yellow contrasts well against dark backgrounds, and the black or the dark outline contrasts well against light backgrounds. You may find that the colors that you are using might not contrast well with either of these, and so you might need to adjust these depending on the themes of your course. So next we'll get into some tips around configuring the focus order. So a best practice that I'm very passionate about, and I have been known to get combative when arguing about using this method or not, or involves buttons and layers. So Judy asked about this in one of our happy hours and mentioned it at the beginning of or at the top of the hour. So we'll be talking about it in the focus order. So just from a keyboard user's perspective and from a screen reader's perspective. And we'll go into a little more depth on the screen reader perspective later in the presentation. And go ahead and close that because that won't be necessary. So So if we're going, we'll go click into here. So how this is programmed by default, I left this as the default. So in Storyline, we go to the focus order for not this one, but the next slide. You can see that all of my layer content comes first. And that is not a great experience. So we go back to the here. So I have my focus was originally on using the first tab, then I'll go to the next tab, then I'll go to the next tab, then I'll go back, then it'll start to go to the player navigation. And I'll have to either go back to the top to then get to that button that's inside the layer, or if I'm already here, I'll have to use Shift Tab to navigate backwards to it. And that goes for all of the buttons in here, which is not a fun experience trying to navigate around with just a keyboard. So instead, what I would do is I would set it up so that the focus order goes from the first button to then all of the content in that first layer. Then second button, second layer content, third button, third layer content. So I'd go to the focus order and rearrange everything. So I have my first button, and I would make sure I would take the content for that first button and move it down. So I would do that for each of these. I would move them down under the button. I'll go ahead and save that. This is especially important for screen reader users. So for keyboard users, they can still see the interactive elements. So if I go back here, as a visual keyboard user, I can still see that there are elements that I want to tab to. And I can just tab around until I get to them. It may be a little frustrating, but at least I can see what I am aiming for. If you're a screen reader user and you cannot see this, you have to rely on the organization of the focus order and alt text to adequately comprehend the content. For a screen reader user, this could become, or they could become completely lost in your slide and not know how any of the content is related to each other.
Luke, do you follow that same principle with dialogue layers?
I haven't worked too much with dialogue layers. I know that.
Present as
Yeah.
under behavior, the
Yep.
first
Present
drop
as
down there.
dialogue layer.
Yeah.
I've noticed that in quiz slides, they'll automatically be dialogue layers. I still try to organize everything so the buttons, any buttons will come before the layers in Storyline. Is that, Judy, is that where you see dialogue layers most often, or do you use them
Well,
in other
I've
purposes?
seen references that, and one of the reasons, that they use dialogue layers for quizzes is to control access to what's on the layers or not. But I don't have a lot of experience with that, and it's always confusing that, like, so which one should you use and how do you control so that somebody, and I wrote this in some post years ago, if you have an interaction that branches, you don't necessarily want somebody to go to all the layers. Based on what they click on the base, might be they go to this layer or they might go to that other layer, but then they can't, and to me, that's where it gets, like, how do you do that and still make it accessible?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that dialogue layers solve that problem or not.
Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, I haven't really explored
Yeah.
what
Okay.
what a dialogue layer means. I know they are definitely different.
Well, it's a modal layer so that you can't interact with the player at all.
Oh, I see. Okay. It
It's kind of like a
automatically.
light box, but on the slide itself. So
Hmm.
it completely eliminates your for at least somebody using a mouse, and I'm not, and I think even a keyboard, you can't interact with anything except what's on the layer. And
Hmm.
then you do have to have something to close the layer to get back to everything else.
Yep.
So that there is that sense of you can't just click around to other things when you're when you go to there. But I've never really understood how that impacts the keyboard stuff and the screen reader stuff especially.
Hmm.
So
That would be a fun test to do. Maybe we'll have to I'll have to create another course to test that out and share it with the community.
So I'm gonna chime in because I use dialogue layers a little bit. And mostly because in like if you answer a question, it'll be like try again, or if you click somewhere, you can have a try again for the try again, or for the and then those are the pre-built ones in storylines. There's an accessibility one or accessible one and whatever. Um, but they tend to come with a button. And so when you're working with your screen reader, it'll, read the header, try again, and then whatever text you put in. And then there's usually a continue button or a try again button or something that
yeah,
you would use your tab key then to access. Or in the case of a screen reader, if you're just using your screen reader, it's an arrow and an enter, and that gets you off of that dialogue layer.
Hmm. I think when you are isolated to that layer, as the screen reader user is or keyboard user is cycling through what is available in the reading order, they'll realize that it is limited to the text and the button, and that they just have to hit the button. It might not be the most accessible experience, but at least as they are cycling through the different objects, they can tell that they need to hit the button to continue. Thank you, Wendy and Judy, and Greg for adding in the chat. All right. So the next tip I have is for managing the focus order window. So the focus order window by default is this size, and unfortunately you can't go smaller than that, but you can go wider and taller. So expanding it out will give you more room to read what your especially long names for objects are. So in this case, it says it's what is the slide, then what is or then it would be what is the layer. Um, Actually, I think the layer might come first. If we go back to uh, this one, yeah, it says yep. So it'll say focus order tips, layers. Let's see. Yeah, it'll say the layer name, then the object name and then if it's on the base slide, it will say the slide name and then the object. So when you're working with the focus order, you can expand it horizontally to make it easier to see the names. It also gives you more space to see what your alt text is if you are choosing to write your alt text in the focus order window. And then you can expand it vertically to see more objects, make it easier to rearrange them. For most slides, this will probably be enough because you can fit, I think, looks to be about 12 objects, but if you do have more complicated slides, it is nice to be able to expand. Additionally, you can move it around all around your screen. This is nice because as you are working in the focus order window, as you select objects, it highlights it out on the screen. And if you have anything hiding behind the focus order window, you can move it to be able to see what it is highlighting. Right, let's close that. So I have a few more tips for configuring focus order. One thing is naming everything. And this version of the course, or the presentation, is not built very accessible yet. So I'll be making this completely accessible and sending that out to everybody as an additional resource, so you can compare what it was before to what it is when it's up to my accessibility standards. So one of the things is I like to do is name everything. Text boxes aren't as important to name because they are pretty self-explanatory, but as you get into things like buttons, button 1, button 2, button 3 don't really describe the situation well, including especially on these buttons are not, they're just rectangular 1, 2, and 3, doesn't describe anything. So in this case, I would say that is the wrong rectangle. I would say user experience tab. And this assists when this helps when you are arranging things in the focus order, but I find that it helps a lot just in development in general, especially if you are using triggers, because those names will also show up in the trigger window. For example, now this says user experience tab, so I know that is my button that goes to the user experience layer. Rectangle 4 or rectangle 3 don't really help describe much.
If you want to get really picky about it, I like to name things and say, like if it's all the buttons, B dash user experience, B dash screen reader, because then they also appear in order in your object triggers because that goes alphabetical. So I might even say B1 dash user experience, B1 dash screen read, or B2 dash screen reader, B3 dash my hill.
That is a fantastic tip. Thank you, Judy.
For those of us who are into alphabetical, chronological, numerical orders, yes, it helps.
I like to do that with my file management.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd think I would do it with my storyline object management too.
It is huge for development and troubleshooting to have meaningful names.
Especially if you're going to hand off a course to someone else to either manage any new changes, or if you're in the middle of development and you just need to switch to something else, that will help them understand what everything on your slide is. And their learning curve for picking up your course and running with it will be a lot shorter. So the second tip I have here is to create accessible templates for yourself. So if you are going to use a slide, again, throughout your course, configuring those accessibility considerations such as focus order, alt text, and in the case of all the other accessibility considerations, doing that on the very first version of the slide before you then duplicate it over and over again will save you a lot of time, because if you don't, you'll have to do that for you'll have to do the accessibility configuration for each of those slides that you have created. And finally, I recommend that you test how the keyboard experience feels to you. So if you are in here and you're going through and you're finding that, oh wait, I want to go to the example button next, but I'm going here instead, that might be a red flag for you to then go in and configure the focus order properly. So test, which is everybody knows that. All right. Any questions on keyboard accessibility or focus order before I move on to screen reader accessibility? All right, let's talk about screen reader accessibility. So screen readers are software programs that assist people who are blind to interact effectively with computer programs and apps. They will provide audio descriptions for for just everything that is on the screen, whether it's interactive objects, text. Even when you're typing, it can read out what you are typing. It'll pretty much read everything going on the computer. The screen reader that I use is NVDA. It is a free open source screen reader. I do have the download page linked from the resources slide. So if you aren't already using a screen reader and for testing purposes, that is a great place to start. It's pretty simple to use, but it can also be quite a lot if you've never used a screen reader. So I do have an audio clip of the screen reader. So when you have a chance, I'd recommend listening to that to kind of see how this specific screen would be read by a screen reader.
Luke, when you say it can be read in different ways, read through the entire thing in one go or read only the objects of focus, do you set that or does the person using the screen reader set that?
That would be in the screen reader settings itself.
Okay.
I haven't figured out those settings yet, and I found that it does it unexpectedly, or it isn't consistent when it does that or not. So a little bit more about what screen readers do. They will give context for the object that you are focusing on. If it's a heading and it is programmed as a heading, so in this case, I have it set to use heading the format heading 1. So the screen reader will announce that this is a heading. For bulleted lists, it will announce that they are bulleted lists when you're entering the list. So the screen reader would say list with 3 items and then bullet, name everything, bullet, create accessible templates, bullet, test how the experience feels to you. And then as you move, if there was more content after this, it would announce that you're leaving the list, which is convenient for screen reader users to fully understand the content. Additionally, it will say when the object is a button or a graphic or any other type. And I do see that, Jeff, you had a question about video slides. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I'm wondering if, like, you have a short video on the slide, if there's any considerations. I was back at the keyboard accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Would you want to pause first? Would you want to, I mean, those are, in the controls. Is that something that, is there any considerations for that?
I will actually get to that I'll get to that in the pitfalls, but
okay, great. Yep.
Yeah, the recommendation is to turn off autoplay. I guess there really isn't an autoplay option, but to make it so narration does not start immediately. So in this case, I made this button open a layer. If we go to storyline, this will open a layer, and that is the audio. So there isn't any audio on the base layer, just to make sure that it doesn't play when a screen reader gets to the slide. Because screen readers often will read the name of your slide when you arrive at a slide. And if you arrive at a slide and and the narration immediately plays, there could be audio overlap that is a lot. I've experienced it many times in testing, and it is quite a lot to have this screen reader reading at the same time as narration. Barb, I see that you have a question about bold font. I don't know if I've experienced that.
I thought I heard or saw it somewhere. I just don't know if in fact that's an issue.
Yeah, I would have to test that out. I could get back to you after testing it out.
Thanks.
All right, let's go back to the slide. So the screen reader will also follow how you configure, or the default of how the focus/reading order is configured. So if it'll follow that focus order, and it'll also read the default text or edited alternate or alt text. So everything you put in to Storyline, or that you configure yourself, will be read either as is. So I'll read this as body text, then a list, then body text, then two lists, or you'll read it as alt text that you configure yourself. So in this case, would be just the default alt text. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. But then, Judy asked about how it reads, or how the screen reader reads. Occasionally, it will read the entire slide in one go, from top of the focus order to the bottom of the focus order. I'm not sure yet why it does that, but generally what it will do is it'll read just the object that you're focusing on. So if I were going to run through this with a screen reader, it would read my heading, then it would read each line, stopping after each line break, and I would be using the arrow key to navigate through each line. And when you are navigating through in that manner, there tends to be a character limit. None of these text lines are long enough to reach that limit. But say if you went and you went to my notes for this slide, my notes is gone. But if you went to my notes for this slide, you would find that that it would probably pause anywhere from 5 to 10 times while reading through this entire 2 paragraphs. And I'm reading Greg's comment. Oh, that is a good idea. Yep, I've thought about doing that as well. That is a great idea, Greg. Thank you for adding that. All right. So there are 2 ways to configure the alt text. You can the first way is through the focus order window, and I did mention this before. You can go to the alternate text cell and type in your alternate text. In this case, I wouldn't want to type anything for the text because I don't want it to change, but for the image, I would type in focus order for window with one object selected. And while you are typing in here, you are limited to that cell. That is where expanding it can come in handy. That's interesting. But if you do go beyond it, so if I have this line again, you'll get little arrow keys for scrolling up and down to see all of your alt text. The second way to configure alt text is through the accessibility window, and this is the method I would recommend because it is the most handy. There are two different ways to get to the accessibility window. The first is by right-clicking on an object, either on your slide, and then going to accessibility, or you can also right-click on it in the timeline and go to the accessibility window. The second way is to go to, when you have a object selected, you can then go to the Format tab, to the Size and Position group, and then select the little drop-down arrow, and this will open the Size and Position tab and your accessibility or size and position window, and then your accessibility window will be one of the tabs here. Now, one of the convenient things about the accessibility window and why I like it more than the focus window is that this will stay open as you are clicking around and editing your slides, even as you move between slides. If you're in the focus order window, you cannot click on anything outside of the focus order. You have to close that window before you do anything else. So when you're actually editing in the accessibility window, there are a few options that will be available. You can toggle on or off the visibility of the object. Turning this off will remove the object from the focus order, and keyboards and screen readers will not be able to see this unless you turn it back on. So this is important, or this is handy if you have a lot of just decorative objects. You can quickly remove them from the visibility and the focus order. Unfortunately, this window cannot be expanded, so you cannot increase the size of the field. But the text that you put in is scrolls from left to right, which I think is a little easier to handle than in the focus order window. Additionally, in the accessibility window, you will see what the default alt text is. If you're in the focus order, you will only see alt text if it has been previously edited, and it is showing this one here. I think because I have now opened it up and made changes to it in the past. So I'd like to cover the kind of the defaults while we're here. When you are, go back to, so in this case, you can see I have written alt text, but if I would go back to one of these, for any files that you insert into your course, the file name will be the default alt text, and screen readers will read this as accessibility window or actually they'll probably read it as accessibility window pause and then PNG, because there's a period. You'll consider any periods as periods. For anything that you add in, such as or any built-in storyline objects, so such as any characters, shapes, any icons, they will their default text, and that is not a good example because I adjusted that one. Their default text will be, I've lost all my examples. So in this case, this is a rectangle. There's another bad example. I can't remember where all my good examples are. We'll go back to the keyboard accessibility. So these buttons. These will just say, buttons will say what the text you have in there, if it's text-based. If it's just a normal rectangle, such as here, you'll read the default alt text will read as the name that the object comes into your timeline. And even if you change that name, so if I change this to my layer border, it'll still remain as rectangle until you change it yourself. If you can't tell, you can see this is what I mean as I go off on tangents and lose my train of thought. And then, like I said with the button, any objects that are text-based, the default alt text will just be that text. So next we will go into best practices and tips for configuring alt text, and we'll start with buttons. So the alt text for buttons, for the most part, if they're just things that will do one thing without kind of basically that if they're not used in a quiz slide or to display more content. So if you're building custom next previous buttons or any close buttons, all they have to say is close or next or previous, and that gives the screen reader user enough context. But if they're used in quiz slides or to display more content, they need to communicate their different states through alt text. There are some built-in buttons, such as the radio buttons and checkboxes. They have built-in alt text that communicates their state. They will say checked or unchecked as you move to them with using your keyboard. But for all other objects that are used as buttons, you will need to add alt text for the normal state, the selected state, and the visited state if you are using it. And you'll see that hover state is not included in that. That is because hover states cannot be triggered or cannot be activated without a mouse. Hover states only, I'll switch to back here. Hover states only activate when the cursor is over them. That means if you're going to them with your keyboard, you will never actually activate the hover state, and even if you have alt text for the hover state, a screen reader won't know that, or won't hear that that alt text for the hover state, unless they happen to also have a mouse and they just kind of bump it and slide it over the hover state. But that doesn't mean that hover states are not acceptable to use in accessible courses. They just cannot offer new information. So in this case, hovering over this just lets me know as a visual mouse user that my cursor is over an interactive object. That is the same as if I'm hovering or if I'm moving with the keyboard to, oh my goodness, sorry, I did not pay attention to time. I'll go through the rest really fast. So this hover state is not offering any new information that a keyboard user or screen reader user cannot know. But if I hover over this one, there's text, and that is not an acceptable use of a hover state. Okay, let's go fast. So when in an example of a custom quiz slide, your states need to let a screen reader know when the object is unselected or when the object is selected. So you would go into your states editor, you'd open them up, open the accessibility window, and you want to make sure that the normal state has a variation of selected, and the selected or the normal state has a variation of unselected, and the selected state has a variation of selected. Now, when the buttons show new layers, the language is a little bit different. So since the layers are not visible, the content on the layers are not visible until the layers are actually open, not visible to screen readers until the layers is actually open. The screen reader users will not know that until they actually open the layer. So to help them understand that, your normal state should have a variation of collapsed, letting them know that there is hidden content. Selected states should say expanded, to let them know that the hidden content is now visible. And then if you are using visited states, just adding visited lets them know that they have already seen that content. And as I showed, you can open up the states. You can open up the states tab to edit the alt text for each individual state. So in this case, I don't have them programmed, but they would have text like this here. All right, so I have a lot of best practices. I see that I only have a couple minutes left. So I do have all of my reasoning behind these best practices written in the notes. So I'll let everybody kind of read those on their own. And then I also have the pitfalls, and I have those written out as well. But I'd like to kind of cover or see if anybody would have any quick questions about any of these that I can further elaborate on. So I'll give everybody a few seconds to look at the different pitfalls to watch out for.
The additional objects in states immediately caught my eye because I tend to avoid using groups. And to do that, it's often insert like an icon directly into the state instead of having an icon plus a rectangle plus a text box or something.
Yep. So if I put a shape in, let's do a plus sign, put that in there. So if I just leave that there, that will now be in the focus order. Or you won't see it in the focus order if I remember correctly, but screen readers will still see it.
Really?
I think. Let's see. Because it's still visible to accessibility tools. It's not in the focus order because it is part of this object. So the focus order will only look at this object, but screen readers will still see this because it is visible to it. So you'll want to make sure for any objects in your states, any additional objects in your states, that this is toggled to off.
Good to know.
Yep. And go ahead and switch over to here. So I'll let the timeline play. So the other one, exit animations. Once your objects exit the slide, you cannot toggle to them. But if I go back here, I can now toggle to it, or I can now tab to it. But when it disappears, it's inaccessible to keyboard and screen reader users. So that's an important thing to remember. Animations are okay. Just make sure they don't leave the slide at any point, because you want everybody to still be able to understand them. That is, the exception is decorative objects. If decorative objects are coming in and out, that isn't essential information that a screen reader user needs to know. Similar to how you don't need to write alt text for decorative objects, such as my pitfall here. All right, and
what about that? I know we're late. But I see not hiding base layer objects.
Yes, yep. So if you have, say, a button, I don't have any examples of it, but say if this button here opened up a big window or a big rectangle that covered this button up, if I'm tabbing around, I will tab to this and I will see the focus indicator around this, even though there's a big white rectangle in front of it. And that, so if you go to your timeline.
How are you?
Ooh, and so we'll go here. So if you go to one of your layers, you open up this base layer objects tab.
Yeah.
And thank you everybody who are here, or thank you to everybody who has joined and needs to drop off. I'm happy to stay on a couple more minutes to answer more questions. But here you can then go in and hide certain objects. So in this case, I have hidden this picture on my layers so that it doesn't show up. And that also means I can use less objects overall. I don't need to put another rectangle in my layers to cover this up. I can just hide it in all of my layers.
But if it was a button on the base layer, like you have buttons that are always visible, like those three,
yep,
then you're still showing them, and so that's not an issue. It's
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel it's a way to just have a cleaner slide, less objects, less things to worry about in the focus order. Yeah. So like I said, I put a list of resources in, and if anybody else has other resources, I would love to know. The L&D community is one of the resources I recommend, either eLearning Heroes or anybody else in the Articulate user group. So I will be sending these resources out along with the fully accessible version of this course. So thank you everybody for joining me today. I didn't quite get through as much of it as I would have liked, but I do definitely thank you for the questions you've asked, and thank you for joining me today.
This was really great. Thanks a lot, Luke.
You're welcome.